Okay, so I've got my drawers and doors back in. The cabinet is going to stay in this firm position. I know that my cover panel going on this side is 3/4 of an inch thick. So I'm going to measure up and get these measurements off to my Granite guy so that they can fabricate the Granite top for me. Once I install the Granite top, I've got this sink, which is the exact sink that I've been using upstairs for the other washrooms. And I'm also going to use the same taps down here just to keep that flow and similar finishes throughout the house. This is an undermount sink, so when I send my dimensions to the Granite guy, I've got to make sure that I give him a center line measurement for this sink. When my Granite piece comes, it's going to be cut in and all polished all around perfectly, ready to go. I will silicone this edge around the outside, pop the sink up and just brace a piece of plywood in as a leg so the silicone can dry. Then I mix up some epoxy and put a few blobs of it around the perimeter of this to the underside of the Granite countertop. And that's typical installation for an undermount sink. So I'm going to start by just putting the sink down here and measuring up. When you're measuring for a countertop, sometimes the walls are out of square. I've noticed that my wall is slightly out of square, about 1/8 of an inch. So this dimension from here to here is 1/8 inch smaller than my dimension from here to here. So if you're not doing tile on top of your Granite and you want it perfectly tight against the wall so that that joint is not visible, then you really have to be precise with your measuring for this. So just gonna get a couple more measurements for the sink center and such, and I'll give my Granite guy a call. Now I want my sink to be right center with this center line of the cabinet. So to mark my center sink line, I'm just gonna come off the wall here, and then he would be able to take off the back edge of his Granite to this way to match the dimension that I'm gonna give him. Check this. Okay, so you can see here, this is 30 1/4 inches. That's my sink center line. This is my front measurement, 42 1/8. This is my back measurement, 42. And this is the size of the sink that I'm undermounting. They typically make it a little bit smaller so that there's a flange that overhangs the sink as well. So now all I've got left to do is just measure out from here. I like 1 inch to 1 1/4 inch overhang past the fronts. So I've got just over, well, 22 1/16. I'll add 1 1/4 inch to that. And same over here. Okay, so I'm ready to, I'll probably just take a picture of this with my phone and send it by email to him, and he can get started on fabricating the countertop. Okay, so very important when you're using granite that you don't really, you transport it on its edge and you keep it on its edge as much as you can. Now I'm going to proceed by sliding this top back to the back edge and then slowly bring it down, but kind of give it some support in this area so that it doesn't break. Because I have a sink cut out and just got thin strips here, it's definitely vulnerable in those areas, so just be aware of that. Okay, so that looks gorgeous. My measurements were really good. I got a nice tight joint here. I am tiling, so I mean, you could have upwards of 1/4 inch. What's really important though is like these details right here where maybe the tile will have to cover this fine line that's there. This line is small enough that I could use silicone and just hide it, but so I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do, to be honest. Actually, I might just silicone this one. I might run my mirror right down to the top of the granite, or I might put one row of tile in. But definitely want these areas to be tight here and up here, which I've got. So now that this is dropped in and in position, I'm going to silicone it down. So what I'll do is I'll come in on this edge, just put a fine bead of silicone. I'll silicone on the inside here. I'll silicone on this inside edge here. And then I'll probably pull this one drawer out and just give a little bit of a bead there, and this thing will be secure. Sweet. Sweet, that's really good. Good?
Yeah.
Gotta hide that. I need that to be like fucking. I cut the tip the wrong way to hide it. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to come in on this side. Sorry, dude.
It's okay. That's actually probably better.
And then I'll just. Yeah. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the basement. This wall here, I had to put here because there's a telepost hidden in here, and there was another telepost hidden in this area here. So it also worked convenient from my dry bar area to be able to make some popcorn or grab some drinks and set them onto the bar ledge here. And from the living room side of this bar ledge, people can have some bar stools, watch a game or play pool, whatever your basement's getting used for. So rather than throwing a conventional top on here like plastic laminate or granite or something like that, I wanted something more rustic and nicer to put a glass down on without, you know, damaging, well, you're not going to damage the countertop, but like without the big glass sound, basically. And what I've chosen to do here is I've got a rough cut piece of cedar. This is rough sawn, not routed or planed down to its actual dimension. So this is 2 inches by 12 inches, rough sawn cedar. I'm going to use a full length piece here, set it on top of this 2x4 wall, leaving a little bit of a ledge on this side to have some bar stools or an area just to sit. And so what I'm going to do with this cedar is notch it into these ends and carry it past this corner a little bit and past this corner a little bit on this side, and also matching that same detail over on this side. So I've got a little bit of measuring to do to get the wood cut to the exact size that I need. And then once I get the piece cut to the size that I need, I'll dry fit it to make sure it fits. I'll take it back to the shop, sand it all down, make sure you can't get any slivers on it. I'm probably going to put a nice routed edge around the edge of the top, possibly on the corners as well, not too sure yet. But when you're in this situation, if it was granite that I was doing, I wouldn't be too sure if this wall is square or if this is all square or what it is. So I would maybe want to use some corrugated plastic or cardboard to make a template exactly to the size that I wanted, and then I could get that fabricated. For me today, because I am using a rough wood, and I'm going to finish up at the top here with a little bit of a silicone joint, I'm probably just going to take some measurements and use my squares, large square, framing square, and speed square to check if this wall is square, to check if this section is square, and then so on and so on. Make myself a little template of what I need to mark out up top in the shop, and then I will mark that on the wood and cut it from there. Now, these corners are a little tricky because I chose 45 degree chamfer corners. So to template those, I could get some paper or cardboard or whatever and try to cut them with scissors to make them work. I'm choosing to use a different method, which is I'm going to use a piece of leftover copper wire from the electrical wire and press this around this corner to make a template of the exact corner. So I'm just going to press this on here nice and tight, make sure it's the exact shape of this mold. And you can see that right there, I've got the exact shape of that corner. So then when I've got my wood marked out from this dimension to this dimension, and I've got both these pieces templated, then I'll mark that on my wood, these exact corners, and then I'll be ready to cut this wood. So there's many different ways to do a ledge like this. I'm choosing a rough cedar. Like I said, you could do granite, you could do a laminate top for here. It's kind of up to you, but I'm going to show you the process to make it a nice, rustic, wooden cedar ledge. So I'm back in the shop here. Here's my rough sawn cedar plank. 2x12 was the rough dimensions. You can see it's pretty rough, so it's going to need a sanding before I finish it all off. But to start, I'm going to use my drawing that I made downstairs. Cut this board to as close as possible to what I think it is down there, and do some dry fits and probably a couple adjustments to get it to fit. What I chose to do was on the back side of the wall, here's our template. On the back side of the wall, I'm leaving an 1.75" hang, like overhang. And on this side of the wall, I'm leaving a 5" overhang. So these templates, once I cut to length, will sit in, like I said, that little bit, 1.75" over here, 3.5 inches here, and 5 inches over there. So what I'm gonna do now is cut this long board to my desired length. Now, looking at the board, I want to choose which side is going to be the top, which side is going to be the bottom. You can see I still got some water on it because I just picked this up today at the lumber mill, and there was a little bit of snow on it. So not a big deal, but there's a crack here on this end and a few knots. I could live with these knots, but always good to check the other side. There's that crack again, and the knots are definitely larger on this side. So I'm going to use this side as my back side, and this being the top side. So I'm just going to mark a square cut on this side, and then measure over. When you're using dimensional lumber, or almost any lumber, you should square your own end. Often from the factory, this end won't be square to start, so it's always a good idea just to start that, and then I'll take my total measurement, cut that down, and then I'm going to work my copper wire templates on top of this plank once it's to length, to work on my recessed notches to set it in place. Okay, great. After making those cuts, you can see I got the crack out of the piece of wood that I wanted to use, so that's really handy. Now I'm going to set my piece up here and work on using my templates to finalize the notch cuts that I need to make inside there. So what I'm going to do, because I want an 1.75" overhang here, I'm going to measure in 1.75". Use my large framing square. Mark myself a line. Measure in. The depth that I need to go, and then I also measure this width back here, and then that'll allow me to put my wire on this indicator line, line up this wire on its indicator line, pin it down, and make this line around the template. And that should be fairly close to what we bent this wire on downstairs. Okay, now that I've got this board cut to the length that I need, I am going to use my drawing, lay out this couple of squares on the end of each side so that I can fit my template on to get those chamfer corners laid out. Now, I wanted an 1.75" overhang on the back side of the bar ledge, and I wanted a 5-inch overhang on the front. So I'm going to start by laying out the width of the wall on this board here, coming in at 1 3/4 inches from the backside, and then I will make a square, creating this line by the depth that I know I want my board to go around the wall. At that point, I can put my wire template on top of that square and get these 2 side notch cuts that I need to get. Keep in mind, when you bent this wire, or when I bent this wire around the wall, it was on the outside of the wall. So when you mark your lines here, you've got to put the wire to the outside of your lines and mark on the inside of the wire. So that's a pretty big key tip. So. Now my depth was 3.5. Now my wire template, I'm going to set on the outside of that square. And I'm just going to mark on the inside of the wire for these 2 corners. Okay, and that should be it. Okay, so I've got my board marked out here. You can see that it's going to be quite difficult to make those cuts, those 45-degree angle cuts that I need to make for those corners that I have on my drywall. The best tool to use in this scenario would be a jigsaw. This is my jigsaw here. It's a really handy tool, allows you to make more intricate cuts like that in a small area. It's called a jigsaw because it's just jigging this blade up and down. This is a great tool for numerous situations. You can cut metal with it as well. Just depends on the type of blades that you want to use. And it is good for like scribing things that are on an awkward line, not a straight line kind of thing. So one thing with the jigsaw, when you need to make a direction change with your blade, or if you need to get inside a piece to be able to get the blade inside, you want to use a drill bit and your drill, and you want to drill a hole that is larger than the size of the bit in your area. So I can cut into this line that way, no problems, to that corner, but making that turn to make this 45-degree cut here, it's pretty tough. So I'm going to drill a hole there. I'll probably drill a hole there, a hole there, and a hole there, and that'll allow me to place my jigsaw blade into the material and start off at those points. So I'm going to get started here. So staying inside the line, I'll drill a hole. Okay, so now that I've got those startup holes, when I'm coming to this inside corner, I can get my blade inside there and start working at it, and then I can draw my blade on the other side and work it back. So when I've got something marked out like this, I'm going to play it safe and cut on the inside of my line so that I can go and make a couple dry fits to see if I can get it in, and I can make adjustments with the jigsaw quite easily. Like if I go around the inside of this line and it's a little bit tight on this side, then I'll come back and shave a little bit off on that side. If it's not quite deep enough, then I can come in here with the jigsaw and make another pass at it inside there to make the throat a little deeper. So very effective tool for these situations, almost a must-have for any home person that wants to do some stuff around their place. Just gonna grab my safety gear and I'll make this cut. One thing about the jigsaw is you need to make sure your material is very stable when you're cutting, so I'm going to clamp this material to my workbench. Another thing is a lot of material gets thrown at your face from the blade, so you definitely have to wear eye protection, and I always wear hearing protection when anything's noisy. So I'm going to put this stuff on and we're going to get started. Okay, so now I've made the straight cut, and you can see that I'm in my hole that I drilled on an inside corner, so now I'm able to pivot the blade and work that corner. Now I've worked that corner and I'm in my other hole. I'll carry on with the line, and then I should be able to finish this cut to about there, and then I'll work it the last section in. Okay, so I've got my rough cut complete. Now I'll do the other side, and I'll go down to the basement and start doing some dry fits to see what I need to work on to make this fit tight. Okay, so now that you're finished with the jigsaw and your cuts are looking really good, you're on the inside of your line, what I'm going to do now is flip this material over. When I go to try to do my dry fit, and because of the thickness of the material, it will be hard to get it in the exact position without scraping the wall. So basically, if I went in high and low on the one side, the bottom corner of this notch is still going to hit the wall before it drops in. So I'm going to flip this material to this side, and I'm going to use my circular saw to scrape out this corner of wood, but not going through the front. So you'll never see underneath here as long as I stay within this wall width, but it will help me glide the top down in without scraping the walls. So I'm gonna grab my circular saw, I'm gonna set up here, retract the guard, and scrape out some of the inside there. Now when you retract the guard, you gotta be a little more careful with the saw than you normally are because the blade is exposed. And so you gotta really have a good firm grip on it and start the machine up and just glide at it slowly and kind of carve out the backside of this material. Okay, got my power on, saw's good. Retracting the blade, you see there that blade is fully exposed, so you know you can get hurt. You just got to be real safe with what you're doing here. Gonna start the saw up and plunge it into the wood, holding it very tightly, and then I'm gonna glide this way. And then I might go at it a couple more passes until I get some of this inside material carved out. Okay, so that's nice and carved out. When you flip this upside down on top, no one's gonna be able to see that section. I've left about a 1/2 inch to 5/8 of material still around that edge for my first dry fit. If I find it's a little tight, I'll just carve it out some more. Okay, so I've got my piece cut, notches on both sides. I'm ready to do my dry fit to see where I stand with my notches here and if I need to carve anything out. So I've got to put it in on the angle and try to drop it down. It's really kind of tight here on the right. Let's get it on a little bit more. Okay, seems to be fitting very well on this side. On this side here, I'm going to have to widen my cut just a tiny little bit, and then I can proceed to drop it down. This side seems nice and tight. Hopefully once I shave just a tiny little bit on the inside here, I'll be able to drop it right in and see what's going on. But you may take a few more times. It might take you 10 times going back to the shop, carving that in a little bit just so that I can keep it tight. So better to start by cutting on the inside of your line, because obviously if I would have cut on the outside of the line on that side, it might have been too loose. So it's better to be, in this situation, smaller than larger, just so that you can clean out the area and make it fit tight. Okay, so after many attempts at dry fitting and just shaving in on my lines, this is where I am right now. Looking really nice and tight in on this joint still. This joint point here, I've got a gap across the front, which is okay. That just means I'm gonna have to take off that amount off this backside of the wood, and it should allow it to go in. So what I'm gonna do is set my pencil up and see what this looks like, and then transfer that line onto here. So I'm gonna scribe the front amount that needs to be reduced over to the backside here, and I should be able to make one last final cut, and this should drop in. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good here. You can see that I've got this side down into position. The joint is fairly tight around the wall. Looking at this side here, it's looking equally as well. Now, if I was going to leave this board a rough finish, I would be done. I'd probably put some glue underneath this edge here on top of the wall, push this down to pressure it into there, and then finish off with a couple of screws and cap over them with some custom made plugs and finish this. That would be the finish of my install. For what I'm doing here, I don't want to get slivers, and I'm looking for a little cleaner look. So now that I've got it to this position, I don't want to jam it down into this all the way down, or I may not be able to get it back up. So I'm confident that the next time I come in with my sanded down finished piece, that I can pound this down on this side and it will be in its final position. So what I'm going to do is remove my dry fit now, go out into the garage, belt sand this top, belt sand this face, belt sand some of the underneath ledge here, this face and the underneath ledge here, break the edge with some sandpaper, take a look at it. I may choose to do some extra things like maybe put a routed edge on it with a 45-degree chamfer, which is kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do. And then once I've got this all sprayed with my lacquer, I'm just using a clear lacquer, I will let it dry out into the shop, come down into the basement, finish the install, put the screws in, add the plugs to cover the screws, and give this one final coat of lacquer in position, and then I can finish the walls and patches and nicks that I've made, getting this into position, and I'm ready for final paint around this. So if you're in a finished area already and you do damage the walls, you're just going to have to repaint them. Fitting things in tightly like this will require some touch-ups on your walls because you're going to nick it, rub against it, and things like that. So ideally, better to leave your walls unfinished until you've got this piece in, or any countertop in, and do one more final coat of paint around those areas. Just going to pull this out and go to the shop for one last time. Okay, so now I've got this chamfer routed here on the edge. I'm really liking how it looks. Where it touches the wall over here, I didn't chamfer that edge just because I don't want any like spilled drinks or debris to get caught in that corner, so I left this square. Chamfered all the way across here, did the return edge here, all the way down, and the return edge on this side. So now what I'm going to do is just get my sanding block and clean up any fine areas that are still sticking up a little bit. And because this is a soft wood, I'm just going to kind of, to prevent slivers from coming off of this, I'm just going to really break this edge just a tiny little bit more to make it softer. And then I'll rub this down with a tack cloth, blow it off with my air compressor, and get ready to start putting my coats of lacquer onto it. I'm not going to stain this, I'm just going with a clear, high gloss lacquer finish. Okay, so that seems pretty good. I'm not trying to smooth this front edge right off. I still want some of that rough, rustic feel to this piece of wood. So I'm really just looking to break the bottom edge so that you can't get a sliver off of it, and just clean up my chamfer that I've made with the router a little bit and just get the, little rough edges smoothed out. Really think this is turning out great. It's got some nice cracks in it in here, and the knots and stuff like that I think are really gonna stand out once we start putting our lacquer on top of that. So now that we're done our sanding, I'm gonna wipe this down with a little moist cloth just to get the dust, and then I'll dry it off with my air compressor, and then I'll probably begin to spray on my lacquer. Okay, so the manufacturer says to shake this can for 2 minutes, and then when I'm ready to spray, keep the nozzle or the spray 8 to 12 inches away from the surface, and it says to use thin coats. I would imagine this piece of wood, just from times in the past, is going to take about 3 coats. So I'm just going to do 3 nice light dustings on this face, flip it over, do 3 on the other side, and then when I'm down in the basement after it's final installed, I'm going to prep off the areas and do 1 final spray on site. So I'm going to lift this block of wood, or put some blocks of wood underneath this so that you guys can see my spraying a little bit better. Okay, that's looking pretty good for a first coat. You don't want to overdo it, create any runs or anything like that. Like I said, a couple of thin coats is better than one big heavy one with runs. Now I'm done with my spray can here. It says on the can to spray it upside down until you don't see any spray. That just clears out the nozzle and the tip end so that the spray can be used again without the tip being seized up. There we go. And we'll let this dry. It says 2 hours, and then we'll recoat. Okay, so my first coat of lacquer is finished and dry. It's been 2 hours. You can see the wood has stayed more golden in color now. And first coat is really filled in some of the imperfections with a little bit of the lacquer. Just loving how the character of this wood is really coming out with the grains and some of these cracks. So I'll continue to spray one more coat to see where I'm at, but I'd really like the final to be all these knots filled in with the lacquer, so it may take, like I said earlier, up to 3 coats. So this product, again, shake for 2 minutes again, says no sanding required between coats. These aerosol cans are really handy for just nice little projects like this. If I was doing something quite large, I would want to use a larger paint sprayer. So I'm just going to get started here with coating this all up again. Now you go a little thinner on your second coat because the wood is sealed, so it's not soaking up as much of the lacquer. Okay, so my cedar bar ledge has got a couple coats of lacquer on the top. I'm ready to go down and do the final install to the stub wall that's down there. Now, to do the final install, I wanted to put some construction adhesive along the top of the stub wall, set my counter on top of it, level it out with some shims if necessary. Then I also want to mechanically fasten it somehow. So what I'm going to use is a 3-inch wood screw. You can see going through the material here, I would only go about 1 inch into the stub wall. So I'm going to use a 3/8 bit to countersink a hole about halfway through this material, the ledge material. I'll mark that with a felt pen, which we can do right now. Now, when I run the screw down through there, it'll sink down to this level and get a lot more meat of the screw into the wood below. So the only problem with that is I'm going to end up with 3/8 hole in the top of my bar ledge that's visible. So I'm going to cut some plugs. Plugs of cedar material. This is a 3/8 tapered plug cutter. So what I'm going to do, this is the cedar stock that we used. I'm going to drill a series of holes down into this stock with this taper plug cutter. Then I will cut through this material, and what I should be left with is about 5 or 6 cedar plugs that are tapered smaller, like the 3/8 at the bottom, and they go a little larger at the top. When I come in to attach my bar ledge down, I will then use a little wood glue, put it on the tapered plug, pound it into the hole, and when that's in the hole, use a cutter, a flush cutter, handsaw, and cut that plug off flush with the material, and then, or maybe it'll pound right to the flush level. We'll have to see. But right now we're going to create these plugs, and then we'll go downstairs and do the install. So there we go. There's our first cedar plug. Second, I guess I don't have to cut through the wood with the cedar. I've never used these on cedar before until now. On a hard wood, the plug is definitely not going to just break out that easy. So you will have to make a cut with a jigsaw or a circular saw or whatever down there to cut your plugs free from the base, because this is too thick to drill all the way through with. So I'm probably going to go make another, half a dozen, so that when I go there I can select which one is closest to the grain color that I've drilled the hole by. Install of our cedar bar ledge. Now the cedar bar ledge has got a couple of coats of lacquer on it, so it's most of the lacquering got done outside in a well ventilated place. We're gonna have to do some final coating down here after our installation is done. So to start off the installation, I'm going to use some construction adhesive. So I've got some construction adhesive. This is different than using white glue or carpenter's glue in this situation. This might be out of level or just perfect or whatever, but if I was to put glue on it and then I try to shim around my piece, there's no thickness to carpenter's glue, where this construction adhesive is quite thick. So I like to pump probably a nice generous bead across the center of this. Then when I set my top down on this, it will kind of level out on it and be fully adhered to both sides. Okay, now that my bead of glue's in, time to put the top in. Okay, nice fit. Got my top down. Just gonna check it for level. Looks to me like this side could come up a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is start, when I put my fasteners into this, I'm gonna start on this side, and then once it squishes down, I will set up on this side and use some shims to get it perfect. So how I'm going to fasten this is I'm going to select 3 locations in the center of this wall. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to drill a countersunk hole halfway through this material. Then I'm going to run a 3-inch wood screw down into the bottom and do some shimming to get this perfect. Once I'm happy with where it's at, I'm going to use some plugs that we cut of the cedar material earlier in the shop and fill up these holes with some plugs and cover them over. Flush cut them flush, sand them down, and do my final coat of lacquer in position. So then it should be secure forever. You can bump into it and the glue can never the glue is not the only thing that it's relying on to stay in its position. So let's get started. Just going to mark out some even increments of holes. So I'm going to come in probably 5 inches, maybe 6. I'm going to go 6. And then I want to find center of this wall. Oops. And then I'll measure off the edge of this wood so that I can transfer the center down here. So first hole. Now I'm going to look to pull one right in the center. Okay, now that I've got my locations marked out, I've got a countersink bit here. I'm just going to run it down through. Okay, now I've got my 3 countersunk holes drilled. The adhesive below is still wet, so don't rush. That glue takes a lot longer to dry than a carpenter's glue, so you got workability time. Okay, so I've determined with my level that this side is going to get fastened down, and on this side, to get my bubble to be in the center, I've got to raise it up. So I'm going to fasten my screw in here first, and then work the shims on that side to get it perfect. Okay. Got cedar shims. Now I'm just putting one on each side so that I kind of work this piece up evenly. Okay, that looks really good. I'm going to fasten that. Okay, looks like the center is kind of raised above the base a little bit, so I'm just going to put some shims in there as well. Okay, so that looks really good. Just going to use, break these shims off and then start working on my plugs. Normally I would utility knife those, but because I was at the very end of my shim, they were quite easy to break off, so that's why I did it that way. Got some carpenter's glue. Just going to use the tip of my pencil to get it spread around the sides of the hole. So you're not trying to fill the hole, you're just trying to get it on the side walls the best you can. Got my cedar tapered plug. I'm going to line up the rough grain to go in line with this grain. Okay, and that's giving me resistance as I'm pounding it in, so that's deep enough. That one's giving me resistance there, and I'm going to bring you in on a close-up to check this last one out. Okay, so my plugs are now cut flush and sanded down flush. You can see that I did wear through my surface a little bit with the sandpaper, so it sanded through the lacquer. So to start for my final coats of this, I'm going to just spot prime these whole areas. Then I'll mask off all this full area and spray this as one final piece once I think that these plugs are caught back up to where the rest of this surface is. So it's feeling really solid. I'm really liking the look so far. Can't wait to enjoy slamming a beer down or a Coke or whatever you like onto your wooden bar rail. just gonna mask off these areas so that I can spray my lacquer down here. This is a great tool for masking. Takes a roll of tape on one side and a paper roll on the other. You can buy various lengths of paper. Simply pull your desired length out, pull it against the cutter, and press it on. So it's quite a helpful machine for masking. Now, another thing I'd like to talk to you about is painter's tapes. There is some really good brands of painter's tapes out there that won't pull off your existing paint and won't leave a crappy line there. Lots of tapes have the tendency to let some paint by, leaving a really bad finish line across the top of where it was supposed to be masked. This stuff here leaves a perfect line when you pull the tape off, and you can leave it on the surface for up to a month and it doesn't pull the paint off the other drywall. So worth looking into, you know, if you've ever had that problem where you are tearing your old paint off. Right, so that's looking pretty good. Just gonna put some tape on these areas so it lasts. Could be on here for a day or two, just with the spraying, letting it dry, spraying, letting it dry. So just to be sure my masking doesn't fall apart, I'm just gonna put some tape on it. Okay, so my area's all masked off. Got my spray lacquer here. Just gonna spray one coat to start over top of the area that I sanded where the plugs are. I'll probably throw another coat on top of that just to get 2 coats on the area. Then I'll do a final coat over the whole thing. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna empty the extra spray that's in my tip by turning my can upside down and spraying until it's empty. And I will wait a couple hours and check these out and probably hit them one more time. Okay, so my cedar rail is installed, everything's good, except for underneath here you can see that there's still the raw cut from the drywall. Now you could use cedar strip or something like that to dress that up as well. I'm choosing to use the same material I use on my windowsills, and I'm just going to whip it up underneath here and shoot some finishing nails into it, and then I've got to finish my return corner gluing in that little triangle. I think this gives it a really nice clean look underneath here. Okay, so I'm done on this side. Just gonna go to the other side and finish off that trim there as well. Okay, so we're going to work on the dry bar laminate countertop now. This countertop is a little different than the other one that I demoed to you guys earlier for the laundry room. The one in the laundry room just had, it was fitted between two sides and then one strip of nosing, where this piece has a wall on this side, a wall on this side, and that side, but it's got three intersections of nosing, an inside corner and an outside corner. So a little bit trickier than just, you know, attaching one nosing piece. I've got to put these ones on in an order to, in the right order to have the nosing look right. So I'm going to start by attaching these two, but when I figure out the length for this front strip on this corner, I've got to make an outside miter. So I'm going to use my sanding block and undersand to create a slight bevel on this finishing piece here. And then when I return this piece into it, I'll do the same so that I can end up with a tight outside corner where you can't see the blackness from the laminate. So we're going to work on that. So here's our tools for today. Got a sanding block stapled to a piece of plywood. Helps to clean up those edges afterwards, or if you see anything that you missed during your cleanup of the particle board top. Square pencil, just to mark these strips to the appropriate length. Again, to cut the plastic laminate, I'm going to use a carbide knife and just score it a few times and break it down. Roller tray and foam roller to apply the glue. And of course the small router for with the flush cut router bit to do the first passes, and the offset router bit to do where one laminate meets another. So got all my tools here set up, so let's get started. So I'm just getting a rough measurement here, about a 1/4 inch larger, so that I can handle this piece and make the appropriate cuts to get in closer. Okay, so I'm a little bit past here, so I'm just going to use my sanding block to get it squared up to about the appropriate area, and then I'm going to do some undersanding to get it to be a miter on the outside corner. It's going to take my scrap end and sand on a bevel on this end so that I could dry fit a few times and check and make sure my corner's looking good. Okay, I really like how that looks. So this piece I would be safe to glue on, and this piece I'm going to leave off until I've got this piece set so that I can work it into the other miter and make sure that I have a perfect corner. So I'm going to start with 1 and 2, and once I've got that, then I'm going to work this third one into that miter to make it perfect. Okay, I've got my contact cement ready to go. Got some strips of wood that I've cut just to glue these up without getting glue on top of my tabletop here. And I have wiped everything off with a wet rag to get all the dust, but I'm just going to give it a blow with my compressor. Really helps to have everything as dust free as possible when you're doing plastic laminate. If you get anything between the layers, you'll feel it through the laminate. Okay, that's nice for the first coat. Again, when we're doing this, we're going to put 2 coats on both surfaces before we adhere the 2 together. Okay, I've got a coat on all the surfaces. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll put a second coat. And then once that's dry, I'll stick it to the nosing piece, and we'll get the router ready to go. Okay, so first coat is nice and dry. How you can tell that plastic or contact cement is dry is it's transparent again, where you can see right through it. And it's dry to the touch, like no sticky residue left on your fingers, no feeling like it's attached there. So I'm good and dry on my first coat. I'm going to go ahead and do my second coat now. One thing that I am going to do this time was when I was rolling my glue on the front face here, it was getting extra glue across the top edge. I was using a rag to wipe it down, thought I would try to speed things up, but I don't want to do it the second coat this time, so I'm probably just going to throw a strip of masking tape across that edge so that once I'm done gluing, I can pull the tape and this surface will remain free of glue. So, just going to tape that off and then we'll get going on our second glue. Okay, great. Both pieces seem to be dry now, so that's 2 coats on both surfaces. I'm going to now touch the 2 surfaces together and the contact cement will bond them forever. So plastic laminate is a one-touch thing. So when I'm working on this strip first here, I'm going to push it into this inside corner as tight fitting as I can and then roll it over, keeping it as parallel as I can, using my fingers as guides to bump into this top or bottom edge as I'm setting it down. That way I can line it up perfectly. Got my laminate roller. Just going to put some even pressure on it. Okay, so now I've got the rest of my nosing attached. I'm just working on this one last piece here. Very important, again, it's the outside corner. Just to recap, this nosing piece, I sanded a little 45-degree angle on the backside of the piece. And I've done the same here on this piece, just starting. And what I'm gonna do is just keep dry fitting until I got the perfect miter on this corner. And then I will begin my glue process and stick this one down as well. Okay, I think I've got it. I'm going to start my glue up and get this one set. so my surface is nice and dry and tack free. I'm ready to throw on my second coat. I'll let that dry, and then we should be ready to bond the two layers together. So on the second coat, you can see it's using a lot less of the contact cement. That's because the wood is kind of sealed from the first layer, and so you'll use a lot less on the second coat. Okay, second coat seems to be dry, so now we're going to put the two layers together. I'm going to use some 1/2-inch water lines, just laying them across the wood to prevent the materials from being able to bond to each other before I get it into position. So something like that should work. So I'm just trying to line my sheet up approximately where it needs to go down. Then I'll start removing the pipes from one end and then work it all the way to the other end. Okay, looks all good. It's setting down, or it's resting together with each other. Now I'm just going to roll this out, use my flush router bit across the wall sides, and then switch to my offset bit and finish off this front. So that looks really good for the first pass across the front. I'm just trying to clean off the glue that is kind of stuck on the edge there. Then I'm going to lower my blade a little, or my router bit a little bit more, and give it one more pass. Then it should be good for the sanding block and ready to check for the install. Okay, that's it with the router. Now I'm just going to use my sanding block and clean that edge up so it's not too sharp. And then I'm going to use my file to work this inside corner. I'll bring you in for a close-up, but the router bit only does a round in there, so I've got to use my file to create the exact inside corner. And then I should be ready to take this downstairs and fit it into the dry bar area. Okay, perfect fit. It's sitting really good. I'm going to use my roller, just give it some more rolls. Then I'll go up underneath the cabinet and fasten the countertop down to the cabinets.